Welcome to AMG Academy. Get ready to dive into a vibrant community where insurance professionals come together to discuss the latest in sales techniques, innovative business strategies, and the power of collaboration. Whether you're looking out for the next big trend in sales or seeking insights into strategic business growth, this is your hub. This is AMG Academy.
Hello and welcome once again to another edition of AMG Academy. Matt McClure here with you as always. Glad to be with you as we talk about all things insurance in this wonderful industry that we find ourselves a part of. And today on this edition of the show, I am joined by Shelby Vail, who is an executive marketing director with Amerilife Marketing Group. And Shelby, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's fun to have you because, I love doing this show for a lot of different reasons. One of the reasons is, I talk to people who have kind of either been in the industry for a very long time or been with Amerilife for a very long time or are kind of newer to the industry. You kind of fall into that latter category, right? Tell the viewers and listeners a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming into the industry, I think I'm about close to a year and a half into it now. So definitely a little more on the newer side than the been here forever side. But at the same time, my mom has been a major part in Amerilife for I think close to 20 years now. So I did kind of have like a little bit of a mentor kind of coming into it. I think I had a little more insight as to what the industry entails as far as somebody who's coming into it with no experience. So, I mean, as little of experience as I had, I still kind of had a lot of people there and a lot of experience around me to kind of soak it all up and dive head into it. But we're coming up on a year and a half and I've never been happier. I feel like I play a significant role in many people's lives and businesses. And I think that's a super important role to play, rather.
It really is. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I love being a part of this industry. And I always start off the show by saying, it's a wonderful industry to be in because, you can really have a big impact on people's lives and, while making a life for yourself in the process and getting the balance of those two things, I think is wonderful, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's a major issue, from dealing with people who are, running a business and helping them with, business structures and models as far as, making sure they have a, liquid, smooth business and their operation is full. And then it trickles down to the clients. First and foremost, I think that's our most important kind of goal is to make sure that clients are, being educated properly and are making the decisions that, may affect the rest of their life, So I think it's important, and I think there's a lot of cause behind it. I mean, when you kind of just say, we're in the insurance industry, I don't think people necessarily understand the depth that it goes into for people's day-to-day lives. It could be your mom, it could be your grandma, but it's kind of personal for me. If somebody, I like to picture it as if somebody was talking to my grandma. I want somebody to be very well educated and make sure they're laying it all out there clearly so that she knows exactly what she's getting into. And I think that's a very important thing that a lot of people miss.
Yeah, keep that in mind because these are real people, real people's lives that we are dealing with and always talking about. And along those lines, I mean, today we're going to talk a little bit about Medicare supplement plans. And you wanted to kind of go through a little bit of the differences between, it's funny because I often, anytime I do things for any of the radio shows or podcasts that I do for Amerilife and the retirement.radio network that I work with, anytime that I do that, it's sort of like when we talk about Medicare, we sort of talk about the alphabet soup of Medicare. There's A, B, C, D, all the different letters of the alphabet, even to G and N and those things. You want to sort of talk about kind of the difference between some of these different med sup plans as we start off here. So what are some of the ones that you wanted to highlight and talk about here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the most common Medicare supplement, at least nowadays, is going to be your Plan G, and I think that's where a lot of people's head goes when they hear Medicare supplements. Obviously, I think the most sold Medicare supplement plan today is probably going to be your Plan G. But we've seen a lot of changes, with, rates increasing, and kind of navigating the winds that we have to face in the Medicare industry, we've seen a lot of changes. And with those changes, we've seen things like making the decision to go with necessarily like a plan N or a high deductible G or one of the other plan, the alphabet soup, I guess, one of the other letters, is always going to be an option, and I think as time goes on, rates increase, and things change in the space. I think that's where a lot of these other plan options are going to come up in conversation. And I think, knowing the differences between the two and also highlighting, the price differences between everything is really going to make it clear for the customer and help them make that choice as to what letter they want to go with.
Yeah, and that's really, where that client agent relationship comes in is helping people navigate those different types of issues that may arise with one plan or another. I mean, because it really everybody's situation is different. Everybody's, what they can afford is different. The amount of coverage they might need will be different. Like, how can agents and clients then work together to really determine what kind of coverage they need in their particular situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super important. And obviously when it comes to Medicare, I think the amount of options for a client are a little overwhelming. You could go with any of the different Medicare supplement letters, as well as all the different Medicare Advantage plans that are out in the space. So I think it can be overwhelming for a lot of clients, and I think it really is left up to the agent to kind of, decipher that and make it more of a simplified understanding for a client. And I think that's where a lot of the other plan letters are lacking. I think that's why people don't talk about these other plan options as much, is because they, first and foremost, aren't educated enough in the differences to have that conversation. And then B, I think when a client is sitting down with an agent, the last thing they want to do is dive deep into the weeds of, plan coverage and everything else. And I think it can become so confusing that it's almost like an overwhelming thing where a client can essentially hit a wall where they're like, man, I don't know what to go with. I'm just going to go with a plan G because that's what everybody else does. And I really think it's important because I think there's a lot of money that can be saved for clients. Going with a lesser plan option doesn't necessarily mean that you are putting yourself out or you're necessarily cutting your coverage options down. I think the goal essentially should be to achieve comprehensive coverage, and highlighting the path to get to that comprehensive coverage, I think, is where it's extremely important for agents to know the differences and to know the ins and outs of all these different Medicare supplement plans.
Yeah. And I think, again, sort of building that relationship with a client, that relationship sort of trust is so important when you're talking about going through all of these different types of plans and everything, because you want to be able to, have a connection with the client and also be able to explain the differences between these different types of plans kind of in plain English. So as you say, you don't get sort of down into the weeds too much and just confuse and overwhelm, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not as complicated as a lot of, I think, agents view it. I think they take it on as this big, task that they're going to have to learn all these differences, and it's really not that much, and when you break it down, to a financial sense, it makes more financial sense in most cases for clients to be on a lesser plan that's more affordable, than it does for them to jump onto a plan G where we're seeing rate increases left and right. Obviously, highlighting a plan N specifically, we see the rates are more stable. And I think when clients jump into a Medicare supplement, I think that's what a lot of, that client base is for. They want to be able to plan the longevity of their plan. They want to, even if that plan were to take rate increases, they want to be able to kind of look down the line and say, where am I going to be at in 10 years? And, having more stable rates on the plan inside of things, that's also, it gives you an easier option to be able to plan for the future accordingly.
Yeah, it does. It, gives people a little bit of, I guess, more of an at ease feeling, a little bit of peace of mind that they're not going to see, these big jumps in costs and all of that going forward, 100%. And I know that speaking of numbers, I think you ran some numbers here for us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got my notes here. So this client that we're looking at, 65-year-old in Akron, Ohio. So the zip code I used was 44314. And so basically I'm going to give you the plan G the traditional, what, you would coming into it and not knowing anything about any of the other plans, where you would be looking at. So the most common, choice is going to be your plan G, and you're going to see that right around 114.96, which is a little more affordable than some of the other states we've seen. So obviously that can kind of change a little bit. But for a plan G in Akron, Ohio, 65-year-olds looking at 114.96. Now, obviously that can vary between carriers, but one of the more competitive price ranges is right around that 114. Whereas if we look at a plan in, the plan in comes in at 89.49. So right there, you're already saving, over $25 a month. So when you look at it for the year, you're right around $300, 305.64 to be exact, that the client would be saving for the year from going with the plan N over the plan G. Okay. And so in that, obviously with plan N, so the downsides to it are going to be you have like a $20 copay that a doctor can choose to charge you for doctor's visits. Now, often, in clients that I've spoke with and agents that I've gone over with, they don't often see that $20 copay. So it is something that the doctor can choose to charge you, but it is not something that we see every doctor charge. So I think a lot of clients, when they hear that, $20 copay for doctor's visits, they automatically assume every time they go to the doctor, they're going to see that $20. And that's just not the case. In order for, something that a lot of people don't know, in order for the doctor to charge that $20 copay, the client has to have already met their Part B deductible. So for those first few times in the year, those doctor visits for sure aren't going to have that $20 fee in there. But if we were to do the math on it, just on this client specifically alone, they would have to go to the doctor 15 times in 1 year and that's not including the Part B deductible. So, just in that, for healthier clients, saving the $25, is going to be the better option, 100%. Now, you are going to kind of open yourself up to a little bit of risk, and that's in the co-pays and stuff like that. With Plan N, you'll also see a $50 ER copay. Sorry. So if you were to go to the emergency room, you would then have a $50 copay. And again, this is something that we don't see very often, and it's at the discretion of the doctor. So, often the doctors aren't going to charge it. Or if they do, it's not going to be, say, if they go to the same doctor 5 times, that doctor isn't necessarily going to charge them $20 5 times. So we do see it, effectively on the cost saving side of things. And that's not even to go into the benefits of the rate stability and everything else that comes with the plan in.
Yeah, right. And that could just really magnify any savings that you might have going forward, right? If those comparing G to N, if those rates on G just keep going up and up and up, but the rates on N are much more stable in future years, then that could really mean a big difference. And you talk about like 300 and some odd dollar savings over a 12-month period for this fictional client in North Central Ohio, that they save that amount of money, but that can make a big difference, especially to someone who is living on a fixed income and not
Absolutely.
and they're just kind of helping or having rather to kind of pinch the pennies and everything to make ends meet every month.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a lot of seniors in the market are, they're on a limited income. A lot of them are trying to plan for that next year, and they're trying to make sure that they're covered, they're not, a lot of them are no longer working or they're retired. So they are on a very limited income, and the $25 a month, I mean, is a big deal, and being able to save that for the client year in after year, you're stacking up these amount of savings where you look at, come 5 or 10 years down the road, it's really substantial amount of money.
Yeah, it really adds up. And, I mean, a lot of people might say, well, what about, I've been talking a lot about MedSup here, Medicare supplement plans, and you mentioned, briefly Medicare Advantage there, but, it's like, what are the kind of the basic differences between the two that agents need to be talking with their clients about Because it's kind of two different animals there, with kind of sort of intended to fill the same void that the traditional Medicare leaves. But talk about kind of what those differences are, and how maybe an agent could sort of navigate the basics of which way to head with a client.
Absolutely. So I think where a lot of people draw the line in the sand is they say, okay, people who are poverty stricken or have not in the best financial standings, they're going to obviously gravitate towards a Medicare Advantage plan. A lot of the Medicare Advantage plans have $0 premiums and they have, the drug benefits baked into it. So there are a lot of benefits. And I think a $0 premium from somebody who is, financially tight, a $0 premium is going to be extremely attractive. Where you see the alternative side of the coin is, with Medicare supplements, a lot of people assume that, people have to be wealthy to be on a Medicare supplement. And that's just not the case. I feel like I like to kind of picture things as necessarily like a sliding scale, essentially. So if you are on, say, a Medicare supplement, a traditional Plan G, obviously it's going to be more expensive than say like a Plan N. But if you're a healthier client, maybe you have some money in savings, you wouldn't necessarily classify yourself as wealthy by any means. But you do have a plan for the future and you're trying to make sure that you can plan for 10 years down the road, 5, 10 years, however, far you're trying to look. I think when you highlight the options of, I think people see, all right, it's either I get on a Plan G Medicare supplement and I stay on it, or I get on a Medicare Advantage. And that's just not the case. With a lot of these, other plan letters like Plan N and high deductible Gs, you can still have that conversation of having a Medicare supplement and planning for that longevity. Whereas on a Medicare Advantage, you may only be able to plan that longevity for a year or two before, having to review your options in the market and say, okay, well, what has this plan changed? Are there certain drugs that have been removed from the formulary? Like what are the changes that I'm looking at this year? Whereas with a Medicare supplement, you don't see those changes. A lot of seniors who are on that fixed income like to be able to say, okay, I'm going to pay my premium. My benefits aren't going to change. As long as I pay my premium, my coverage is going to be essentially the same. And I think that peace of mind is where the Medicare supplements win over the Medicare Advantage. But obviously, you have the $0 premiums and things like that kind of, push clients in the other direction. So I think both are a great option. Obviously, the overall goal is to achieve comprehensive coverage. And there's many ways that you can do that, whether it's through different plan letters or a Medicare Advantage with different ancillary products like hospital indemnity and stuff like that to fill the gaps. I think it's achievable on multiple levels and with multiple products, and being able to sit down and have that conversation and give the client the choice, educate them in what the two plans are, what the differences, you're going to face are going to be, and then let them make that decision as to where they want to take their future, and I think you're there to kind of guide them, as well as kind of highlighting, both the negatives and benefits of these plans.
Yeah, and it's all about figuring out what pieces of the puzzle to put together for that particular client, and and working with them as a team, and trying to say, okay, here is where I believe that you would benefit most, and then going with what the client feels most comfortable with. I feel like all of that is so important to just highlight and be able to help people navigate, right? Because you want people to be comfortable not only with the amount of money that's coming out of pocket every month, but you want people to be comfortable with their coverage overall. And, being able to, and we talked about earlier, kind of, people tend to be overwhelmed if you get in the weeds too much, but being able to just sort of hit those high points and those highlights of the coverage details so that people do know the basics of what each sort of plan option that they might have entails. I think is important. Kind of goes back to that, explaining things in plain English for people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A lot of clients, they don't work every day in this industry like you or I. It's something that I think has become a normal conversation for us around the office, and it's like if I were to go across the hall here and talk to somebody, I would be shocked if they didn't know the differences between the plan N and the plan G. But at the same time, I think clients, they're not in that same space that we are. They don't have these conversations every day. So being able to sit down with a client and review these options and have that relationship with them to where they can comfortably say that, my agent advised me to make the correct decision for my specific, needs and requirements that I'm going to need for my retirement. I think sitting down and having those conversations is a ball that's often missed, and I think, like you said, being able to put it in, like a normal person's vocabulary, I think is something that's heavily important.
Making sense of the alphabet soup.
Absolutely.
It can be a tough job, but it's our job in this industry to do just that. Well, Shelby, this is a great conversation, I think, and I think will sort of help clear some of the fog away for a lot of folks when, talking about these differences between these plans and helping them navigate for their clients. Anything else before we run that you wanted to share that we haven't gotten to touch on here?
No, I think that about covers mostly everything. The only thing I will say is, agents, watch out for that plan N. It's coming. Don't shy away from it. You don't want to be left behind. It's a great option. And as well as clients, explore that opportunity. Don't think that it's just such a gray or a white and black, Medicare Advantage or Medicare supplement. There's a large gray area that's not talked about enough in this industry.
Yeah. And people have those options, and those options are there. Let them know about them. And people like having options after all. So there you go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Options are what we're made of, so.
100%. And our job is, of course, to help them navigate all of those different choices that they can make. Well, Shelby Vail is an executive marketing director with Amerilife Marketing Group. Shelby, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll talk again here on the show soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to coming back.
Thank you. And thank you for listening and or watching this edition of AMG Academy. I'm Matt McClure, and we will talk to you again next time.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of AMG Academy. For more information on any of today's topics or to contact us, visit AmerilifeMarketingGroup.com.